Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're not sugarcoating anything, we're diving straight into the top 10 worst small towns in America for 2025. These aren't just places with a few problems, these are towns dealing with collapsing economies, sky-high crime rates, failing schools, and living conditions that'll make you want to pack the car and keep driving. If you've ever wondered where the American dream went to die, this list is going to show you. 10. Gadsden, Alabama. Let's be blunt, Gadsden is the kind of place where your future feels like it's on pause permanently. With a population hovering around 33,000, this small Alabama town has one of the slowest growing economies in the entire state. The median household income sits at just $37,000, nearly 40% below the national average, and almost 25% of residents live below the poverty line. That's not a small hiccup, that's a full-blown emergency. And don't be fooled by the cheap real estate either. The average home price is around $90,000, which might sound like a deal until you realize property values here have been flatlining for years, like a heart monitor that already called the code. Industry-wise, Gadsden's collapse was sealed decades ago when its once thriving steel industry vaporized, leaving behind polluted waterways, rusting warehouses, and entire neighborhoods where unemployment has been normalized into a way of life. If you want crime stats, they'll make your stomach churn. Residents face a 1 in 23 chance of becoming a crime victim every year. That puts it on par with some of the most crime-riddled neighborhoods in Chicago. Add in tornado risk, frequent flooding from the Coosa River, and one of the worst public healthcare access scores in the Southeast, and you've got a recipe for misery. People don't move here for opportunity. They inherit a house and spend most of their lives scheming how to leave it. 9. Danville, Virginia. Now Danville is one of those towns that once believed tobacco and textiles would carry them forever. Spoiler alert, they didn't. In 2025, Danville, with just over 40,000 residents, feels like a relic of an America that doesn't exist anymore. The downtown is dotted with historic brick factories that are more photogenic than functional because nearly all of them shut down decades ago. This left the city with an unemployment hangover that still lingers like the smoke of a bad cigar. The average annual income is barely $38,000, and the poverty rate has ballooned to nearly 27%. Housing is dirt cheap, with median home values around $88,000, but that's because demand is non-existent. Young professionals don't move here, retirees don't retire here, and businesses don't set up shop here. Public schools rank among the bottom 15% nationwide, with literacy test scores trailing by nearly 2 full grade levels compared to the national average. And don't think you can escape all this with a quiet, crime-free existence either. Danville reports a violent crime rate that's almost twice the state average, with burglaries and car thefts keeping insurance rates sky high. For a town its size, Danville has an eerie amount of payday lenders and pawn shops, which tells you more about the local economy than any Chamber of Commerce brochure ever could. The final nail? Opioid overdoses here outpace the Virginia average by almost 300%. That's not decline, it's collapse. 8. Camden, Arkansas. Camden is what happens when a once bustling defense and manufacturing hub just runs out of gas. Located in Wichita County with about 10,000 residents, Camden's population has been in freefall for decades, down nearly 25% since 1990. The local economy is anchored by defense contracts, but those jobs are scarce, unstable, and subject to brutal government cuts. The median income here is barely $32,000, and the unemployment rate is double the national average. When it comes to property values, Camden homes hover around $70,000 cheaper than a Tesla Model Y, and yet buyers still stay away in droves. Crime statistics paint an even darker picture. Residents have a 1 in 20 chance of being a victim of property crime, and violent crime rates are nearly 3 times the Arkansas average. Infrastructure isn't much better. Camden's roads are cratered with potholes that look like artillery hits, and flooding from the Ouachita River causes recurring damage the town never seems able to fix. The schools, forget it. Nearly 60% of students fail state math proficiency tests, and teacher turnover is among the highest in Arkansas. Add in a declining healthcare system where the nearest decent hospital is nearly an hour away, and you've got a perfect storm of decay. When outsiders describe dying towns of the South, Camden is usually the first example. 7. Gary, Indiana. If America ever needed a cautionary tale about what happens when you build your entire identity on steel and then watch the industry implode, Gary is that story. Once a booming hub of 180,000 residents, Gary now barely scrapes by with under 70,000 people and shrinking fast. The city's population density is collapsing, leaving block after block of abandoned houses that look more like war ruins than neighborhoods. Crime is the inevitable companion. Gary's violent crime rate is 4 times the national average, and property crime is rampant enough that even Dollar Generals here need reinforced glass. The average household income, a pitiful $3,000 to $4,000. Homes are technically cheap, with a median price of just $52,000, but with 30% of properties standing vacant, even investors won't touch them. Schools are a disaster. Half the high schools have been shut down in the past decade due to declining enrollment, and the graduation rate hovers in the mid-60s. Health outcomes are equally bleak. Life expectancy in Gary is almost 9 years shorter than the U.S. average, and rates of asthma and lead poisoning are among the highest in the Midwest due to lingering industrial pollution. When people say the Rust Belt never recovered, Gary is usually the first name that comes up, a town trapped in a feedback loop of depopulation, crime, and hopelessness. 6. Florence, South Carolina. Florence might sound like a charming southern city, but don't let the pretty name fool you. Life here can be brutally difficult. With a population of about 38,000, Florence struggles with some of the highest crime rates in the Carolinas. The violent crime rate is more than double the national average, and property crimes like burglary and car theft keep local police stretched thin. Economically, Florence suffers from a dangerous dependency on low-wage jobs. The median household income is just $41,000, and nearly 23% of residents live under the poverty line. This imbalance creates a vicious cycle where people are working, but they're not making enough to escape poverty. The housing market reflects that stagnation. Homes average around $135,000, but appreciation rates are practically flat, meaning buying property here is less of an investment and more of a gamble. Schools are consistently underperforming, with Florence students lagging 2 grade levels behind state averages in math and reading. Health statistics aren't much better. Obesity rates are near 40%, and heart disease mortality rates are among the worst in South Carolina. Add in the city's notorious flooding problems during hurricane season. Florence sits in a floodplain that's been repeatedly slammed by storms, and you have a small town where risk outweighs reward at every corner. Florence is not where you go to build a future. It's where you end up stuck if you can't find a way out. Pine Bluff has been circling the drain for years, and in 2025, it shows no sign of pulling out of its tailspin. With around 40,000 residents, Pine Bluff is infamous for being one of the most violent small cities in the United States. FBI data puts the violent crime rate at nearly 5 times the national average, meaning you have a 1 in 18 chance of being attacked, robbed, or worse every year. And that's just the beginning. The median household income is barely $34,000, and almost a third of the population lives in poverty. Numbers you'd expect from a third-world nation, not an American town. The housing market is practically a parody. The average home costs $72,000, but vacancy rates are through the roof, with entire neighborhoods sitting empty, crumbling into dust. Education isn't the saving grace here either. Pine Bluff schools score in the bottom 10% nationwide, with dropout rates stubbornly high. The city has also been ravaged by the opioid crisis, with overdose deaths surging in the last 3 years. Add in failing infrastructure, roads full of sinkholes, water contamination warnings issued like clockwork, and one of the weakest healthcare systems in the state, and you've got a town where daily life feels like survival. Pine Bluff's downtown looks like a postcard from the 1950s, only the colors have all faded, the shops are boarded up, and the future never arrived. 4. Litchfield, Kentucky. Tucked into the heart of Grayson County, Litchfield is a small town of around 7,000 that manages to combine all the problems of rural poverty with none of the charm. The unemployment rate hovers at a miserable 12%, which is nearly triple the national average, and the jobs that do exist pay so little, you'd think the clock stopped in 9. The median household income is only $38,000, while the state's average sits comfortably higher. Schools here are consistently underfunded, with student-to-teacher ratios so bad that parents joke kids are better off learning algebra from YouTube. But there's nothing funny about the crime situation. Residents face a 1 in 30% chance of property crime every year, and meth labs have practically become a cottage industry in the surrounding backwoods. The housing market reflects the decay. Median home values hover around $85,000, but appreciation rates are negative. Yes, negative. Buying property here is like buying stock in a bankrupt company. The longer you hold it, the more it costs you. Even basic services are a struggle. Litchfield's water system has been plagued with contamination scares in recent years, and access to reliable healthcare requires a 40-minute drive to Elizabethtown. Throw in obesity rates above 40%, life expectancy that's 3 years shorter than the state average, and downtown streets that look deserted by 6 p.m., and you've got a town that feels like it gave up a long time ago. This street, Elkhart, Indiana. Elkhart's nickname used to be the RV capital of the world. Today it's more like the foreclosure capital. With a population of just under 54,000, this northern Indiana town has seen its economy shredded by the boom and bust cycles of manufacturing. Sure, RV production comes back every few years, but when it crashes, so does everything else. The unemployment rate has soared above 10% more than once in the past decade, and even in good years, jobs are unstable and low-paying. Median income hovers at $43,000, but nearly 20% of residents live in poverty. Housing tells an even darker story. Abandoned properties are so common that entire blocks look like ghost neighborhoods. In 2024, a report found that 1 in 6 homes in Elkhart sat vacant or condemned. Violent crime rates are high, over double the Indiana average, and property crime is rampant enough that even local law enforcement admits they don't have the resources to keep up. Schools here are stretched thin, graduation rates barely scratch 70%, and youth out-migration is staggering. Almost every young adult who makes it out of high school packs up and leaves for South Bend, Chicago, or anywhere that isn't Elkhart. To make matters worse, drug overdose deaths here have skyrocketed 400% in the past decade, fueled by fentanyl and meth. What's left is a community staggering under the weight of economic collapse, with little left to attract new residents except dirt-cheap homes nobody really wants. 2. Fort Pierce, Florida. Fort Pierce, the so-called Sunrise City where the only thing rising is the crime rate. Located on Florida's east coast, Fort Pierce has about 47,000 residents, but the problems feel outsized for its population. Violent crime is nearly 3 times the national average, with murder rates that rival some of the country's most dangerous metro areas. Property crimes are rampant too. Car theft, burglaries, and assaults dominate police blotters. On the economic front, things aren't much brighter. The median household income is just $40,000, and the poverty rate sits above 25%. Housing values are technically higher than in some Rust Belt towns, averaging around $210,000, but the property market here is shaky, driven largely by retirees and speculators, not stable middle-class families. Schools are bottom tier, ranked in the lowest 20% statewide, and dropout rates are nearly double the Florida average. Fort Pierce has also gained a grim reputation for its missing persons cases. An abnormally high number of adults vanish every year, often tied to drug trade violence. The city's infrastructure is equally weak. Roads are crumbling, flooding from hurricanes is constant, and emergency services are overwhelmed. While the surrounding Treasure Coast markets itself as a retirement paradise, Fort Pierce is the glaring exception, a city where opportunity is scarce, crime is constant, and the Florida dream feels more like a nightmare. 1. Gallup, New Mexico. And finally, topping the list as the worst small town in America for 2025 is Gallup, New Mexico. This isolated desert town of about 21,000 is a textbook example of generational poverty, addiction, and violence all rolled into one. Gallup has one of the highest violent crime rates in the entire nation, with residents facing a staggering 1 in 17 chance of being victimized every year. Alcohol abuse here is infamous. Gallup ranks in the top 5 nationally for binge drinking, with nearly half of the adult population admitting to heavy alcohol use in the past month. The result? A shocking life expectancy of just 68 years, more than a decade shorter than the U.S. average. The economy is equally bleak. The median household income is only $35,000, and unemployment regularly spikes above 11%. Housing is cheap, with median prices under $120,000, but vacancy rates are high, and many homes are in disrepair. Schools are chronically underfunded, dropout rates exceed 30%, and fewer than 15% of adults hold a bachelor's degree. Healthcare access is a crisis. The local hospital has been overwhelmed for years, with some patients waiting 12+ hours in the ER. On top of that, Gallup's isolation, sitting on I-40 in the middle of nowhere, makes it a prime stop for drug trafficking, which only fuels the cycle of addiction and violence. If you're looking for the American dream, Gallup is where it goes to die. Thriving communities, but now they're buried under crime, poverty, and broken promises. Others never really had a fighting chance to begin with. The truth is, small-town America isn't all white picket fences and friendly neighbors. Sometimes it's boarded-up houses, failing schools, and jobs that barely pay enough to keep the lights on. But now I want to hear from you. Did I miss a town that you think deserves a spot on this list? Or maybe you grew up in one of these places and know firsthand how rough it really is. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until then, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.